Hi everyone, Ed from Bobil Vans here, and welcome to another install video where we're going to be installing this Autoterm Flow 5 coolant heater into this Peugeot boxer, and then we'll be running the pipes off to the Bobil Hydronic system, so the calorifier and the blower boxes. There's not a huge amount of information out there about the install of the flow heaters. They're fairly new in the campervan world. Traditionally, lots of people install air heaters, so we're going to try and give you as much information as we can. Might be a little dry in places, but we'll try and keep it interesting. So that when you get your coolant heater, the installation process is as seamless as possible. So let's jump straight in. One question we do get asked quite a lot is it easier to install an air heater or a coolant heater into a van? Now, in terms of complexity, they're both about the same, but really the nice thing about the coolant heaters is just how flexible they are in terms of their positioning. If you look at the size of the two, the coolant heater is significantly smaller, and it's even more powerful because these air heaters, you've got to have a huge surface area and a lot of airflow through them to get the heat away, whereas with these you can get the heat away really efficiently using the coolant. So in terms of complexity, about the same, but you may find this is just a little bit more flexible. So let's show you what you get in the box if you were to buy an Autoterm Flow heater. First is the heater itself, and you get a length of coolant pipe. There's the exhaust, and you get a little bit of insulation just to protect it, and then anything around it. This is your fuel line, various bags of connectors and bits and bobs, some coolant clips as well, number of exhaust accessories and little rubber bungs if you were going to go through the chassis anywhere. You can use those to protect the coolant pipe. Nice little elbow so that we can use that on the outlet of the exhaust if we've got a tight bend. That's our air intake silencer. Huge coil of wiring, which we'll come on to in a bit more detail later on. That's the coolant circulation pump. Little bracket for the fuel pump, and some little bits of rubber hose things hold it together. Jubilee clips for the air intake. Bracket for the pump. That's the diesel pump itself. Instructions, warranty card. There's our exhaust silencer and exhaust connections. Big bag of screws, bolts, bits and bobs. There's a standpipe which we're going to use to get the fuel out of the fuel tank. And in this box we have little plates. This is just a mounting bracket that we can use to mount the heater to the van. The one thing that can be a little bit daunting when you open the box is the wiring, because there's a large wiring loom, lots of connectors coming off it. So we thought in this part of the video we just break it down into what all the bits do and then how to plug them in and get it all working. So in the middle you'll notice you've got a plug and a socket. They just plug straight into the heater, and those are the only connections you'll need onto the Autoterm. They plug in nice and straightforward. Quite a long loom coming off here. And it's got a red and black striped and a black connector. There's no actual sort of plug on the end of this. This is for the diesel pump. So when you've got this routed to wherever you want, and you can put this sort of through little holes in the chassis or anything, once you've got it to where you want it, there's a little connector like that in this bag, which is the wiring harness mounting kit bag. And all you do is you push those into the back either way around and then push that straight onto the diesel pump. There's quite a lot of length on this. That's because these little pumps prefer to push the diesel rather than pull it. So if you can get the pump mounted next to the fuel tank and let it push the diesel towards the heater, it'll just perform a little bit better. So that's that one. Coming off here, you've got this little interface box. This is a box that we add to the wiring harness. And that allows us to take control of the circulation pump without the Autoterm being involved, which allows us to circulate it and use our AC heating for when you're on grid and you don't want to use the diesel burner. That's got a really nice little plug that'll just plug straight into the circulation pump on the back there. So that goes in nice and straightforward. And then the one that comes off, a couple of meters of loom here, that's going to go up to the slave box. So wherever you're going to install your slave box, you need to run that back up to the slave. Coming over to this side, again, you've got a little bit more flex there, which we've just tidied up. There's another one without a connector on it. Similar thing, it's a very small cable, so you can run this sort of wherever you want. This is going to come back up to the slave box. This is going to be for the push controller, but because the push controller is integrated into the Bobil system, I want to bring it back up to the slave. Same bag, wiring harness, mounting kit. You'll see a little connector like that. The wiring diagram for this is in the Bobil instructions, but you just, once you get it to where you want it, you just push those in the back and that's your connector made. Just two left. Firstly, this one, the power harness. So we've got red and black. That'll go onto your power source. If this is too short, it's completely okay to just extend this with a bit of sort of 3 or 4 mil cable and run that up to your power source. Ideally, you want this to not be switched. So if you've got an isolator on like a 12-volt circuit, you want this to go sort of straight onto the battery. So if the heater's running, you can't accidentally sort of turn the whole thing off because it needs to go through a cool down sequence. So ideally onto a battery, but that's up to you. And then the last one is not used. If you were installing this as an engine preheater, it's got an interface so you can kind of attach it onto a secondary relay and power the blowers or whatever. But because we're not using that as this in this system, you can just call that up and leave that. Right, let's start installing. Here we are under the van. We're just at the back where the handbrake splits. You can see that our water tank's been fitted nicely, so the customer's got lots of fresh and waste water space there. But there's this quite nice void just behind where the handbrake cable splits. It looks like the heater's got plenty of space to fit up in that location. Again, we talked about sort of flexibility of positioning. It can really go anywhere. We're going to try and put it, I think, on this face just to get it close to the tank so that it's just a bit more protected from any sort of road debris or anything like that. One thing you will find on sort of the front-wheel drive vans, this rib depth is relatively short, which is great for getting lots of internal space and getting things mounted under the van. You'll find that on something like a rear-wheel drive Sprinter, this distance will be a lot greater, which means that the heater will probably just go straight onto the chassis. We'll have to make a little plate just to get it to fit. That's fine. So we've mounted the heater on a bit of aluminium composite plate here, and any piece of hardware and material will be fine. Just bolted that through using the plate that came with the heater, and that is now all ready to go on. We've put these spacers on so that we can just bolt it behind the tanks, just allowing those pipes that are already on the chassis to go through that little groove. So that's ready to go on. We don't need to for this installation, but if you get a T25 Torx bit, just undo that screw on the top there. You'll see that you can actually rotate these. So if you wanted the heater pipes come in that way and out that way, or both, vice versa, then that's absolutely fine. You can also get straight ones, but normally you wouldn't normally use a straight one for application underneath a van. We'll just tighten this one up. Because we are limited for space on top of the heater once it's been installed, we are going to get the pipes onto the heater before it goes in. The more you can do on the bench, the better normally, because you're not working on the floor. Let's tighten that one up. Right, there we go. And to attach our pipes, we're going to use these compression clips and the length of hose that came with the heater. What we're going to do is just take that out, and we're essentially just going to put those onto there. Now, the thing to remember about these is that once you compress these, there's a lot of energy in this, and if this was to ping off and hit you in the eye, it'll cause some serious damage. So always make sure you're wearing eye protection. And one thing that we sometimes do is if you get the heater, you pop in a bit of tube like that. You can then put the clip over the tube and you can get it onto here and then secure it onto here and then put it on there. So at least if you lose it in the grips, it's not going to fly off and cause any problems. So you can get some specific tools, but if you don't have specific tools, that's absolutely fine. We usually just use mole grips. And you can just get around the back of the clip. There we go. Just slide that on like that. So slide that down. Go, take this out. And then on top of our heater, just push the hose on. Fairly tight fit, but that's what we want. Oops. And just tighten And then we'll just do the same on the other side. There we go, that's all done. We're not actually going to do anything else to the heater before it goes on. Everything else we can do once it's in situ. So now we're ready to go and get this mounted. Also worth noting that Autoterm do give you quite a few extra elbows and spare clips. So if you did need it to put an elbow on the outside of this to get around a bit of chassis, then that's absolutely fine. Don't have to worry about restricting the coolant because everything's quite large bore at this point. The coolant hose is also fairly flexible. So as long as you've got a nice smooth bend on there, then that'll work just fine. The customer's asked for this single radiator to be mounted under the passenger seat, pretty tight underneath where the chassis member goes. It just kind of goes down here. So I've just done a little pilot hole here, which has come up just inside of the chassis. So what I'm going to do is just 2 clearance holes here, get the pipes through, and I'm going to use these that came in the Autoterm kit. Just going to do a 40mm hole saw straight through, put those in the chassis, and they'll act as nice big grommets for me to get the pipe through to mount the heater. And then when I come to mount this, I think all I'm going to do, this is quite tough material under here. I think all I'm going to do is just make a little spacer plate, space it up slightly, and then just glue that down. And that should be nice and secure. It's not going to get banged by anything because it's tucked away under the seat. And then that'll be nice and neat. Right, I'm quite happy with that. Just need to wait for the hammerite to dry, so I'll probably come back to this tomorrow. I think I'll move on to getting the pipes from the heater to the pump and off to the other heat exchangers. So here we are fitting the standpipe to the van. You can remove the breather by taking the nut out and just prise it out. Drill a 7mm hole. Then you'll want to run an M8 tap down the hole, and then you'll find that the standpipe screws straight in. You'll have to cut the standpipe to about 375mm so it sits on the bottom of the van, putting a little bit of sealant on the thread just to make sure it stays in position. Replace the nut and you're all done. So here we are underneath the fuel tank. We've put the fuel line in a little bit of conduit just to protect it. Comes along the front of the fuel tank, just over there, P-clipped out of the way of the exhaust. Then we're going to go under here, and then there's this little void here, sort of by the driver's step. So that's an ideal place for the fuel pumps. It's fairly deep. And then these are the pipes that go to the blower box, and we can send all of these back down the chassis to where the heater is at the back of the van. I'm really happy with how this has turned out. I have had to use a couple of elbows here to get down through the floor because the bend radius was just a little bit too tight and it was kinking the pipes. But we can get the chair back on. We will have to run these electrical cables back to the slave box, but that's okay. They can just run in the van. We're not going to take them outside. So we can get the chair back on and look at the rest of the heater install. To get a strong leak-proof seal on the calorifier and the coolant tank fittings, we enclose a bottle of blue liquid PTFE, which is a really good thread sealer. Apply it liberally to both threads, dipping it up with a spanner. Here we are back under the van. I really wish we had a vehicle ramp because this would be much easier, but we are where we are. Right, so about to do the exhaust and the air intake. Nice little elbow which goes onto the heater like that. That means we can just send the exhaust straight back. One thing you'll notice when you get this exhaust is that it's got a little slot in it, and that's because when you do up your clips, it just allows the pipe to sort of squash a little bit. If you don't have that, because it's a circle, it won't actually squash and tighten around the heater. So when you go onto the exhaust, just make sure you do another little slot and then get this clip on, and then that will make it nice and tight. So we're going to put that on, send it back all the way to the back corner of the van. With the air intake, again, that'll just go on, just gets dubly clipped on. Most important thing is do not face this forwards. If you face this forwards and you go through a puddle or any sort of water, debris, whatever, will go straight up your air intake, straight into the heater and cause damage. So you want to get this out of the way. You can face it backwards. It doesn't even have to be at the sort of very top of the vehicle because as long as it is backwards, nothing's going to get into there unless you're reversing at 50 miles an hour, which seems unlikely. So we're going to pop this in there and we'll just secure it. Because of the protection that it's going to have, we'll just put it right behind the tank, right at the top. So I just wanted to show you what it looks like now it's all finished. So we've got our exhaust there running into the bottom of the heater. We've got our air intake here facing backwards, nice and out of the way. Nice and neat and tidy. This is the feed from the coolant tank going into the pump, and then the pump then runs into the top of the heater. And then look from the other side, you can see there the coolant pipes down the van with the exhaust, and they go all the way down to the front to where we've got the fuel pump and the connection up to the blower box. And then these are the fuel lines coming back here, fuel lines and the cable. There's our fuel pump mounted at an angle up in the underneath sort of the driver's footwell. Just make a note that these do have to be at an angle with the outlet further up. Otherwise you get air bubbles stuck in the pump. The pump runs too hot because the diesel effectively cools the pump, and you will shorten the life. So just make sure you've got a nice angle on that pump when you get it in. Here's the exciting time. Filling the coolant tank up. So we're just going to use water in this because the customer's actually going to, oh, what a funny noise. The customer's going to potentially remove some of this and move some of it about. So we're just going to test it with water, and then he's going to fill it with coolant once he's happy with the whole system. So this is just for testing. So as we said earlier in the video, there's a lot of wires that come with the kit. We've bought a couple of them into the van here. So a few of these are level sensors, so they go onto the slave board. One of them is the pump connection, and that just goes into the second, third and fourth terminals, which is just labelled pump. So nice and easy, red into plus, black into minus. Fairly straightforward. This one is the power loom, which has got this extra bit of cable. We're not going to use that, so we've just mounted the fuse box up here. And these at the moment just coiled up, and we're just going to run them off a power bank, just so we can test everything before the customer wires it up to his own electrics. This is the one that goes to the controller. As you can see, we just left that coiled up. That runs into the slave board. So this is the slave board lid. Oh, it's all wired up when you receive it. You can unplug it if you want. Essentially, that's the push controller which sits in the lid. That connector runs down onto the board, and then from the board, that runs off, and it runs to this button. So the button will effectively give you sort of a status indicator, and you can control the heater from that button as well, but mostly the heater is going to be controlled from the slave board. So if I just turn the power bank on, hopefully we'll get some power. There we go. So our buttons come on, and that's just flashing away. So the red and the green just says it's making communication with the heater. Hopefully everything's going to be okay. Once it's finished flashing, we know that the system's ready to go. And I'm just going to hold this down for 1.5 seconds. That's going to come on red. Oh, I think I just heard the pump at the back. System's coming to life. You can see that we've got a little bit of a draw on the power bank. So fingers crossed this should now boot up, and then it will fire up. So we filled the tank. You can see a bit of water in there, but you can hear the bubbles coming back out of the tank, blob, 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 as the pump starts to pump it round. So just keep an eye on the tank and then top it up when you need to. You want to get the tank about a third to half full. No need to fill it up all the way. As long as there's enough fluid to go around the system, that's all you need. So we've run the heater once. It's just shut down with an error code, which I expect because there's no fuel in the line. It's quite a long run from the fuel tank to the heater, so going to have a couple of starts to get it through. So just to clear the error, we'll just hold that down a second. Oh, that's cleared it and restarted the heater. Excellent. So we'll just run this a couple more times, and then hopefully after 3 or 4 starts, we'll get some fuel through to the heater. So just give you a quick overview of what we've done. That's the blower box facing forwards. We've got a cable loom just coming back. That's our temporary power source and temporary location for the blower box. There's our slave box. Hydronic pipes coming down through the floor. Again, lots of extra length on here in case the customer wants to move them. This little area here is going to be for sort of pump and accumulation and all of that. So once he's done, he's going to put a big board on the front of this just to sort of partition it off in the garage. This did take a while to get going. We did have an airlock it said it was running, but it was only the circulation pump. If that does happen, one of the best things you can do is just go for a drive. Just the movement of the vehicle will move any air out of the system and get it all working. It looks like temperatures are starting to come up a little bit now. Yeah, so all in all, fairly neat installation, really happy with that, and ready for the customer to come and collect. So the customer turned up a little bit earlier than we were expecting, so we didn't have time to kind of really finish the whole video and show you a couple of other things. So just wanted to just do a quick outro just to explain some of the small issues that we had towards the end of the install. So normally when we do an install, we like to get the circulation pump sitting directly below the coolant tank, and that's so when we fill it, the coolant will go straight into the circulation pump, and as soon as you turn the diesel heater on, it starts pumping the coolant around the system. Because of how we kind of arranged this one, we had the coolant tank here, and we had the circulation pump kind of sitting over here near the heater, which meant that that long length of the coolant hose essentially ended up with an airlock in it. So the symptom of that is that you turn the heater on, the red light comes on, the diesel heater sort of starts up, you can feel all the pipes getting warm on the outlet of the heater, but immediately the heater then shuts down because the internal temperature gets over 95 degrees, the coolant's not being pumped through the heater, the circulation pump stays on, but then the heater just turns itself off. So it looks like it's on, there's no error codes, it's all sort of behaving as normal, but you're not getting coolant circulated through the system. So the solution for this really is actually a bit more coolant in the tank and just go for a drive round, and you'll probably find that just the motion of the vehicle will push the air out of the system. What we did is we just spent 5 minutes squeezing pipes, and eventually it just drew the coolant into the pump, and that's what got it all fired up. So no big deal in the end, but if it looks like it's working but it's not working, then that could be the reason why. The other thing we experienced when we fired it up is something called an error 37. Now what this is, it's a way that the heater kind of protects itself from not having any fuel. So essentially you do 3 normal starts, and after the 3rd start the heater won't fire up. So you press the button, it fires up, and about 7 or 8 seconds later it all just dies again. Now if you search online, there's loads of ways of fixing it, but essentially what you have to do, you turn the heater on just using the push controller, and then a second or two later you just cut the power, and you repeat that 3 times. And then after the 3rd time the heater's internal memory clears all the errors and off you go. The only time this is likely to happen is when you're commissioning it and you don't have any fuel in the line, because especially on a larger vehicle you may find that 3 starts isn't enough to draw all the fuel into the heater. So just be wary of that. If it looks like it's starting up and then nothing's getting hot, it could be an error 37, and you just need to go through the reset process. So the customer's collected the vehicle, they're really happy with what we've done. In case you're wondering why we built the wheel arch box with a sort of overhang underneath, it means we can put the pump, accumulator, any plumbing, and it's all hidden away. And all the customer then has to do is to put one board on the side, and then everything's boxed in. And it's really easy to get to, really easy to maintain if it needs to, but it's also really neat. So it's the way we're going to do hybrid installations going forward. So I hope that's been useful. If there's any more information you need or any questions you have, drop them in the comments, or if you're in an install, just give us a ring if you've got anything you wanted to ask. All right, see you on the next video.